Hello, Habit Mechanics. Dr. Jon Finn here. Hope you've had a good week so far. I'm really excited today because we're going to start exploring the Habit Mechanic book in much more depth than we have previously. We're going to go over the coming months and maybe even years because the book's so long. We're going to dig into each chapter. We're going to talk about the core elements of each chapter, the core tools. We're going to explore some of the stories behind the stories, how these tools and ideas have emerged over tens of thousands of hours of practice and lots of failures. So I'm really excited about that. But when I was thinking about doing this, I recognized that doing it just by myself would be quite difficult. So I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by my good friend and longtime colleague, Andrew Whitelam. Andrew, how you doing?
Yeah, hi John. Yeah, thanks very much for inviting me on. It's quite exciting to be discussing the habit mechanic. I was lucky enough to be involved with you as you were trying to develop the book, and yeah, it's great now to have this opportunity to talk with yourself, the author, directly about it, and I'm sure we'll gain more insights and really bring the book to life in a fantastic way.
Now, I'm sure that if you didn't recognize Andrew's name, you certainly will recognize his voice if you've listened to Tougher Minds and Habit Mechanic things over the years. So I think, Andrew, you've probably worked within Tougher Minds for about 10 years now. First started working with us on the pre-shot stuff. But actually, we first met, I think, about 15 years ago now, on a bench outside a national governing body's headquarters when you were the media manager or that was the role I was working with you in the capacity of. You were the media manager for an international touring team that I was doing some leadership development work for. So we actually first met quite weirdly discussing your leadership psychometric profile, of which I've just written a Forbes article saying that leadership psychometrics damage leaders. But this was 15 years ago, so we've tried and tested those ideas. I hope I didn't damage you, but that was about the first time we met, I think, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right, John. I think it was a relatively warm spring day at the time, at least. So yeah, we were outside on a bench, but I do remember that exercise. And I think even at the time then you were talking around the use of psychometric tests. And yes, obviously your understanding has developed phenomenally in recent years and in the resulting years. And now the habit mechanic and Tougher Minds represents the absolute cutting edge of these ideas. And so yeah, it's also doubly fascinating to be sort of revisiting that moment here and now. But again, as I say, also exploring Tougher Minds principles, ideas, and the habit mechanic book today. So yeah, it was that time, and as you say, your connection then and now ongoing with Elite Sport was what brought us together.
And you're a high performing guy, Andrew. You've been around high performing people. You're into Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and you take that. Um, your interest is very serious in terms of learning what the best of the best do. So, and you're very familiar with Tougher Minds and the habit mechanic approach, but also I know you're very well read. What do you find particularly compelling about Tougher Minds and the habit mechanic?
Well, yeah, I was lucky enough to work in high performance sport, as you say. I'm not sure my own hobby is Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I can't apply the term high performance to my own activities, but you're absolutely right that nevertheless I'm interested in human performance, behavior, what makes people tick, and that's what makes working around Tougher Minds and helping you previously with the podcast, that makes it so fascinating and so interesting. I think for me the habit mechanic book is an absolute fantastic, complete distillation of the work you've been doing, and the understanding, the insight you've been gaining, the practical application of these principles and ideas. And it really is a superb refinement of that. And I think if anybody wants to understand and benefit from these ideas, they should immediately start looking and reading The Habit Mechanic. It's accessible, it's digestible, it's entertaining, it's exciting too, I think, because you sense an immediate benefit. And I think that's not just me saying that to you today, John. I think I've just watched as an objective observer when people have come into contact with these ideas and almost immediately exclaimed and wanted to make it clear how they felt they were immediately benefiting. So I think the simplicity, the practicality of the ideas and the exercises and the processes is fantastic and unique, in my opinion. And also the power and the effectiveness. I mean, I have been lucky enough to work in high performance sport, as you mentioned. I've also seen some other approaches around these sorts of areas and objectives, and there's nothing that comes close to this. That's again just an objective assessment. So it's great to be able to, as I say, talk about it in this way with yourself as the author. It's a unique exercise for sure.
I didn't pay Andrew to say any of that stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think what I found interesting about getting the Habit Mechanic book out there, obviously we know that it literally did take over 20 years to put together, and everything in the book has been tried and tested literally with thousands and thousands of people. And that's why, my passion and the mission of Tougher Minds is to make it as easy as possible for people to be at their best. So it's been really exciting to put the book, which is such a complete self-development program, but also not just for your individuals, but for teams and for leaders as well. It's been great just to put the book into people's hands, and just with people reading the book alone, hear some of the feedback and testimony that's coming back already, even though the book's only been out for about 9 months. I mean, I got I don't know if I told you this actually, but I got a message a few months ago now in the Habit Mechanic University app, someone saying, I just want to say thank you for writing the book, John. I used it to help me to learn how to walk again. And I was thinking, this isn't true. So I actually had a conversation with this person, and it absolutely is true. This chap got told he would never walk again. He had a 12-hour spine operation under 3 doses of general anaesthetic.
Goodness me.
Just as he was coming round from sort of he described a morphine-induced coma, he was kind of coming out and getting some relief of pain. He saw an email that the Habit Mechanic book had come out. He got himself a copy and he used it to restructure his rehab. And when I was speaking to him, he'd actually just started to play golf again. So that's phenomenal. So to hear that story, and then lots of others, almost on a daily basis, people saying that this tool is literally changing my life, or this tool's changing my life. The Habit Mechanic book is just packed full of tools. It's got, I think, about 33 tools in there. It's got habit metric tools, which allow you to analyze your habits, not psychometrics, as they don't work, habit metrics, where you can really start to understand the helpful versus unhelpful automatic things that you're thinking and doing, which is the starting point for getting rid of the unhelpful or destructive things and starting to build more of the helpful things, or what we call the super habits. And then it's got the tools that allow you to secure and build the new super habits. So I'm really excited to dive into the chapters and look at the different ideas. So we're going to begin with chapter 1. Now, we're also on YouTube now. This is the first pod we're doing on YouTube. So I'm actually holding up the book.
And me, John.
and Andrews as well.
Yep.
So it's chapter 1. It's a big, I mean, if you haven't got, and I hear this quite a bit actually, people who've just got the ebook, the Habit Mechanic book is a big, it's a manual. It's 107,000 pages. It's got, I think, 37, 38 chapters. It's not a book with one idea repeated 10 times. It's a manual for life. It's a toolkit for success. I pick this up every day. I have an office at home. I have an office in Tougher Minds HQ, and I have a copy of the Habit Mechanic on every desk that I have. I have 3 in the office in the Tougher Minds HQ. So I've got copies of this everywhere because I'm picking it up all the time. So
I think, just if I can just interrupt, John, yeah, that is worth a point making to people. You use the word manual, and I suppose often when people buy self-help books, then sometimes they just stay on the shelf looking nice in people's houses. But this is something that is digestible. You can consume it like you would a manual and get immediate benefit and start doing things in practical terms. And that's what's so unique for me and so beneficial that you know, and it's very apt that we're going to talk about chapter 1, which is called A Quick Start. And yeah, I think it couldn't be a better illustration of the nature of the book.
Yeah, and my point actually about people who bought the ebook and then they get the physical book, and I've seen so many comments saying, "Wow, I didn't realize how much was in this until I got the physical book." So yeah, chapter 1, quick start, a 2-minute daily exercise to make your life easier. So we structured this chapter in an unusual way. We got feedback from professional editors saying, "Don't do this." They told us, "Don't do it like this." And we said, "No, we think this is the most helpful way to start the book for people." So what did you make of chapter 1, Andrew?
Well, you know, firstly, as you say, John, I do remember you were discussing the editing process of the book, and yeah, there was some skepticism about whether this was the right thing to do. But what you're getting here is immediate benefit, an immediate action that people can take to start feeling better and doing better every day. It really does deliver on the promise of being a short exercise to benefit you, to make your life easier. So and also I think this chapter is you know, really almost quintessentially, if that's rather a big word, but the essence of Tougher Minds, if you like. It is representative of a practical, applicable process that you can implement in your life, but based on very sophisticated science that brings immediate benefit. You know, you have it's a great example of the accessibility and the simplicity you offer to people, the practicality, because you have something in there called a tiny empowering action, which you call a T plan. So that really sticks in your head and immediately intrigues you, I think.
Yeah, and it just reminds me actually, I saw a news story maybe about a month ago. It was on the front page of one of the broadsheets, and it was some data. I'm not sure where the data come from, but it had been published in a peer-reviewed journal. So it was written by the science editor, and it was a paper showing that people helping other people deliberately every day had a more beneficial impact on how they felt and how they were doing than having cognitive behavioral therapy. And the thing that I take away from that data is that the people that were helping other people, doing nice things for other people, like tiny nice things, they were actually doing something different. Whereas the people in CBT, as good as and robust as you know, a lot of our approaches are based on CBT principles, but actually you can spend a long time doing CBT, getting more knowledge about the challenges you're facing, and a few skills to help you to think in a different way. But actually, there's no guarantee you're going to practice those skills and start to do things differently. And for me, it really put a spotlight on this the difference between knowing something and doing it. So this is why all the tools in the habit mechanic book, including the daily tea plan in chapter 1, are about doing things. They're not about knowing things, they're about doing things differently and doing things that are easy to do. So the tea plan, you can do it in 2 minutes. And the tea plan, which we can talk through in a lot of detail, but it's very simple. However, it wasn't simple to create. It was very, very complex to create. And we know how powerful goals are. We talk about goals in chapter 16 and the sort of the nuances of why they're powerful. In very simple terms, goals allow us to direct our energy and our efforts towards something. So if you set a goal, it's easier to put and channel your energies towards it. Also, when you set a goal, you're more aware of it, so you switch on your neocortex. But going through essentially 3 sports psychology degrees, goal setting features quite heavily. And then myself going on to teach goal setting, both at undergraduate level, master's level, teaching it to professional coaches. I spent a long time in front of people going through these goal setting methods of things like smart goal setting or smarter goal setting. And once you get familiar with what those frameworks are, once you get good at teaching them, and you've got some relatable stories that makes it easier for people to understand them and start to implement them, I started to get skeptical because I was thinking there must be a better way to set goals than this. There must be a more effective way. And that set me off on a journey to think about how can we create even more powerful goal setting methodologies. And one of the iterations of that, which is in the book, is called the SWAT cycle, which is the self watch, aim, plan cycle, which is our most basic change cycle. So if we want to make a positive change, we first of all need to be aware of it. So we have to self watch. That's like having a CCTV camera, looking at yourself and observing yourself. And we talk about intelligent self watching. So you might notice, for example, that you might self watch your sleep last night. You might notice that your sleep was only a 7 out of 10. So 10 would have been perfect for you. One would have meant you got no sleep at all. You thought you were about a 7. And your aim might then be to improve your sleep tonight. But good aims are specific and they're written down. So I might commit that I'm going to move my sleep from a 7.5. So from a 7, sorry, to a 7.5, which might mean I need to get an extra 10 minutes sleep or something. But then just having the aim is a bit futile without having a plan. So I need to use a behavioral science-backed plan. We have the habit building plans in the book. But the self-watch, the aim, the plan, and we used that and we started to implement that into how we were coaching and training people. We built that process into our planners. It's in the book multiple times. And that was one of the first ways that I started to, I think, create and colleagues as well that are always contributing to this, people like Andrew Foster, Jim McKenna, Catherine Grant, starting to think how can we make it easier for people to set goals. And it was interesting. One of the things I'd forgotten about was we created, and this would have been probably the version before the T plan, we created a tool called the Yes I Can plan. And that, which actually I can, if you're watching the video, I can hold that up so you can see it.
Yeah, you've just gone slightly. Now there you go, John. Yeah, just brought it slightly too near the camera, but I can see that there. Yeah, a triangular graphic, as it were. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. It's fading in and out.
Yeah.
But with our snazzy background that we have on the screen. But So this is even more sophisticated than just the basic SWOT. And the idea is that it's got this triangle that has stop on it. And the idea is that you commit to an outcome, a very specific thing that you want to achieve. So it might be, I'm going to do 1 hour of focused work between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. And STOP is an acronym. It's the idea is to stop the ape brain, which we had the ape brain before we had Hugh, horribly unhelpful emotions, the character that now operates the ape brain. Ape stands for life perceived energy brain. So stop is the O in stop is about the outcome. The S is about a personal strength you could use. So you could say, I'm going to be determined today. I'm going to be persistent. We talk about strengths in chapter 25 of the book in the focus, productivity, work-life balance section. Talk about willpower boosters, willpower strengths. The T is the trigger. So what triggers can we use to help us to actually get this work done? Writing down the plan would be a trigger. It could be removing some unhelpful triggers from my environment, so turning my phone off, turning the Wi-Fi off if I don't need it, minimalizing distractions. And then the P was about creating a plan. So it could be using our willpower story tool. Again, that's something that's in chapter 25 of the Habit Mechanic. And then we had something called an ape brain stopper device, which could be, using that example again, it could be, I know that my phone is going to be the thing that's probably most likely to get in my way. So I'm going to make sure that I don't just turn that off. I put it out of sight. I put it in the drawer. And then the reward, which is thinking about, if I get this piece of work done, what's the reward for me? What nice thing am I going to do for myself? So this is although it's very sophisticated, it's a far less sophisticated version of what we have in the Habit Mechanic book. But it's all about planning. So if we are gonna get better at managing ourselves, intelligent self-watching and intelligent planning are key. So whether it's the swap cycle, the SI CAN plan, or the C plans we'll come on to, they're all about doing sophisticated planning that starts to factor in the behavioral science. And I'm sure you want to come in a sec, Andrew, but there's a little story that just jumped into my head that's really interesting. So this idea of the ape brain stopper, I remember when we were creating these tools, we were very much establishing our education programs, where we're teaching kids everywhere from top of primary school, prep school, all the way through to A level, and into university degrees, PhD programs, etc. But I remember at this time, a lovely young lad who was very, very enthusiastic, but he was a teenager, and his ape brain was very powerful. I remember him telling me a story about, he created his plans to what he'd actually done is he'd recognized the PlayStation. So this is when they're revising at home in the build up to GCSEs. He'd recognized his PlayStation was the biggest threat. It was the biggest temptation for his ape brain. And so what he'd done is he'd given his mum his lead, the lead that plugged the PlayStation into the TV. And he put that in his mum, the boot of his mum's car, so that she took it off to work with her. And he recalled how he was started to do his revision, and then it just popped into his head that in his older brother's room, his older brother was off at university, he had a spare PlayStation lead. And before he knew it, the lead was plugged in to the computer and the PlayStation, and he was on FIFA, and no revision was getting done that day. So that's how powerful the ape brain is. But yeah, and working with people like that allowed us to refine this process. So I've spoken a lot there, Andrew. What are you thinking about?
Yeah, I think I do recall those stories coming out from Tougher Minds when as you continue to do. You first began working with schools, and a consequence of some of those great anecdotes and behavior changes you've just alluded to were actually improved exam results, by the way. I do remember that as well, some quite phenomenal improvements. So it was a good example, an early example for me to see tougher minds at work. But yeah, I think what's so interesting about this daily tea plan in this first chapter of the book is it does contain, it's distilled down into this relatively innocuous looking exercise on the face of it, is some very sophisticated, powerful behavioral science, including, as you say, intelligent self-watching, this analysis process that's so powerful for people. And then the exercise then starts to help people take the first steps towards building new helpful habits. And again, if on first glance you might mistake it as overly simplistic, but really such a significant amount of sophisticated understanding behind the daily tea plan in the first chapter of the book, and so potentially powerful. And yeah, obviously you were talking about 8 brain stoppers in that early version, if you like, of this sort of thing. And now tea plan, tiny empowering action, is a really really high impact way, a really memorable way to connect yourself to doing these exercises and these processes every day. So I think I'm really fascinated to hear how you arrived at this what is now a pretty slick and usable and powerful, accessible tool.
Yeah, so I think like in my own experience, earlier versions are always less refined, they're clunkier, they're a bit more difficult to do. And of course, we know that the easier we can make something to do, the more likely it is we'll do it, because that's our brain's number one operating rule, is to save energy. So it likes to do easier things. And that's connects to the tiny factor in the 9 action factor model. So I think the earlier versions of the T plan were a bit more explicit in the way they were trying to address factors, whereas the T plan implicitly addresses them. I get, what's the right word that I'm looking for? I think I'm just endlessly fascinated how human beings instinctively dichotomize and polarize their behavior. And I think it's because it's the way that we're educated. We're taught that we're either good at something or we're not good at something, and we probably never will be. And it's the way that we tend to look at ourselves. So I either had a rubbish day yesterday or I had a great day. I'm either fantastic at public speaking or I'm rubbish. I've either got loads of confidence or I've got no confidence. I either did loads of exercise yesterday or I did no exercise. So this is the way that we're conditioned to think about ourselves. And for me, it's just not very helpful. So the T plan has 3 steps. The first step is all about just making it easier for you to do intelligent self-watching. So it's just a simple continuum. Out of 10, 10 means you were perfect, 1 means you failed. And the first question is, how well did you do your best to be your best and achieve your goals yesterday? And if you're doing this in the afternoon and yesterday is too far to think back to, just answer that same question, but for so far today. So straight away, instead of just thinking yesterday was great or it was rubbish, you are thinking in a more detailed and accurate way. And the focus point is, how well did you do to do your best? It's not about anything else. It's just about you and the effort that you put in, because that's what we can ultimately control. How much effort did we put in to doing our best? So it's a simple question, but it's loaded with behavioral science, insights from behavioral science that we know drive what we do.
Yeah, and when you're doing that, John, I know when you introduce these things to people, and again, this is in the first chapter of the book, you guide them exactly how to think and what to think about more specifically when they're doing that initial self-watching exercise.
Yes. So my question to you is, Andrew, what was your score for yesterday?
It was 7.5 out of 10 yesterday.
7.5 out of 10. And I
Yeah,
think you may have posted that today in the Habit Mechanic University app.
yeah, yeah.
And this
I
is
think,
where people, this is the main thing that we're doing in the app right now, is we're posting our daily tea plans.
yeah, and I think again in the chapter of the book you talk about having there's a PDF which you make reference to on the website, and you guide people to that in the chapter of the book. But the Habit Mechanic University app, is the way for people to do this exercise too. And it's fantastic that it's available there. The app is, as you say, being used by a lot of people to do these daily tea plans in an electronic way, and they've got it in their pocket with them. So there's options there for people to undertake this 3-step process. So that's fantastic. That's very accessible and very applicable. And again, I think in the app there's a guidance video which gives people access to the type of training they might get in one of your face-to-face sessions.
Yeah, and I think what's emerging from the app, the Habit Mechanic University app, is that it's a faster and more reliable way to be your best every day, and that rhymes, which is great.
Yeah.
But that's what's emerging, because I actually read James Dyson's autobiography over Christmas, and this idea that he failed over 5,000 times to create the cyclonic vacuum cleaner is well understood. But essentially, James Dyson he had an experience with a traditional vacuum cleaner that compelled him as an engineer that there was a better way to make vacuum cleaners. And essentially that's what I'm saying in chapter 1, is that there's loads of self-help training out there. It's become normalized over the last maybe 10 years or so that we should be working on ourselves. We should be working on how we think and trying to think in increasingly effective ways. It's great to get coaching and support and give people formal training in these areas. But my observation over the last 20 years and doing over 3 degrees in this area is that the traditional approaches to this are just not very good. It's not anybody's fault. I just think that the psychological sciences are about 70 years behind the physiological sciences. Chapter 4 in the book, I talk about Roger Bannister and how he was doing very in-depth physiological research in the laboratories at Oxford University in the 1940s.
Which then enabled him to do a great physical feat of endurance.
Enabled him to really understand what he needed to do to supercharge the physiological adaptation process that would allow him to run faster. Unfortunately, we've only been able to look inside the human brain for the last 20 to 25 years, and we've only in the recent years been able to get enough data to really compel us about what is it that humans are actually designed to do. So the T plan for me is it's like the Habit Mechanic more generally is the Dyson of self-development, leadership development, being at your best. So we're using the best technologies or the best insights, probably a better way to say it, to create our technologies, which is our toolkit, to make it easier for people to be at their best. And a very simple question like, how well did you do your best to be at your best and achieve your goals yesterday out of 10 might seem very simple. As when you look at the cyclonic vacuum cleaner, it seems very simple. It is not. And it's very, very complicated to get it to that level. What I really like about the Habit Mechanic University app is seeing other people's T plans, because it brings it to life. So try to share as many examples in the book, in the chapter 1, as we can, but ultimately you could probably write an entire book about T plan examples. But actually live in the app every day, people are sharing their plans. And also those that are generous enough to share their plans, you can see over time how they're tweaking, refining, learning. Because that's another key thing about the T plan, is it's a daily thing. I mean, I do it on work days. although I do benefit if I do it at the weekend as well. It just, I suppose I've habitualized myself quite well now, to doing the things that I want to do. And the daily tea plan, like all um, habit mechanic tools, I see them, they're a little bit like stabilizers. It's like when you're trying to learn to ride a bike, they give you some stability and they help you to practice the things that are going to be most helpful for you, and they allow you to it makes it easy to keep practicing them, so you habitualize them, so that when you start to build really good habits in an area, it's not essential that you do a tea plan for that particular thing every day, but then you might shift your tea plan into something else.
Yeah, what I'd like to say, I mean, what I would say to you, John, is, I mean, you guide people, as I say, as I was saying, to think about things like their sleep, their diet, their exercise, in terms of how well they did to be their best. Those things or play a role in that. So that's your initial guiding point. Correct me if I'm wrong, but then, as you said, people start to develop their own understanding of themselves through self-watching. Would that be a fair summary of the way that you familiarize and start to help people use this tea plan?
Yeah, that's a great point, Andrew. So I'm just looking at the chapter now. Yeah, so again, the idea of that question, how well did you do your best to be at your best? It's a different question. We don't normally ask ourselves that. So it switches on our prefrontal cortex. It makes us think in a different way. And yeah, so the way I judge myself is when I'm thinking about my, how well did I sleep? What did I eat? How well did I exercise? Because I understand how important those things are for good brain function. How productive was I? How efficient and effective was I with the use of my time? How helpful was I to others? So I'm actually asking myself on a daily basis, how well did I do to be at my best? How well did I do to help others to be at their best? And I'm also asking myself, how well did I do to be a good human being? Because I think if I can score highly across those three areas, then I'm in pretty good shape. So yeah, the more we revisit that daily question, the more we're going to be learning about ourselves and developing what we call our habit mechanic intelligence. And this is a never-ending journey. I wrote this book over the last 20 years, and I'm still learning about myself because it's a never-ending journey. And when I actually listened back to this chapter yesterday, chapter 1 on the audio book, and it made me think of some different things about this tool and this approach that I hadn't thought of before. Because when I listened to it yesterday, I knew some things and experienced some things that I hadn't experienced the last time I listened to it. So this is real evergreen material. It's not something that you just read once and that's it. So you give yourself the score. That's step 1. Step 2 is to create a tiny, empowering action.
Yeah, and
So
this term, I just have to say, I think, John, it's worth saying at this point, this term is, it does stand for tea. We might have a tea every day in more than one sense of that word. But yeah, I think this is the beauty of this, and this is the way that it exemplifies tougher minds. It's so intriguing and stimulating for people to have these tools that just you can have on the tip of your tongue and literally on your desk every day.
yeah, and it's a registered trademark as well. We should point out. But yeah, and I do distinctly remember walking up the road and the idea of tea. So I was walking along and talking to myself silently, um, and therefore I had lots of BDNF in my brain that helped me to think clearly. But I remember thinking, tiny empowering action tea. That's a daily thing that people have, and we know the tiny factor in the 9 action factors. For me, empowerment is really important. We know that, well, for me, the most compelling motivational theory is self-determination theory. And academic theories are a bit like models of cars. So, there are lots of motivational theories out there. I would say that the self-determination theory model is the best, most sleekest model. It's like the Telsa car, if you like. Um, that's the way I think about academic theories. And we know that if we've made the decision, so self-determination is on a continuum. One end of the continuum is I've chosen to do this because I want to do it. And that's the most powerful form of motivation. The other end of the continuum is coercion. I'm doing this because I'm being forced to do it.
I'm
You,
telling
you,
you to do it. You've got to do it.
you quickly give up when you're coerced to do something. When you're making the decision and you're powered by your choice, then you're much more likely to persist. And all the habit mechanic book is framed in that way. There's nothing that I'm telling you to do. There's nothing prescriptive about the habit mechanic approach. And the language is framed very deliberately. You'll see a lot. There's, if not hundred, if not thousands, definitely hundreds of using the phrase "if it's helpful." If it's helpful to you, because if it's not helpful to you, don't do it. That's the thing. So, tiny empowering action. What are you going to choose based on what you understand about you being at your best? That's going to help you to do a little bit better today. And the examples that I give in the book are just, and again, people can be tempted to go too big with this stuff. You got to keep it really tiny. Things like only check the news once today. Things like the one that I use every day is create a willpower story. But other things like writing a positive reflection at the end of the day, going for a 5-minute walk at lunchtime, eating a piece of fruit with breakfast, just picking one tiny thing. What's the thing that you typically pick, Andrew?
Well, yeah, and it's interesting, and it's not because one of your examples, which obviously again in the book you give some examples to help people, to get people on the road to start using this and benefiting from it. My tiny empowering action is to have some fresh air every day, so a walk. I try to keep fit in other ways as well, occasionally myself, but a walk in the fresh air. And a vigorous walk, I suppose, is I feel it's so beneficial. You've explained the very sophisticated and powerful neurological reasons that activity and movement is beneficial. I think you talked about neurochemicals being released in the brain, which are helpful, and that's why it's great to know that. But for me, yeah, it's the feel good factor, I suppose, in common parlance, which is like a bit of a foundation for other things, which then build onto that. Feeling good, feeling well, having willpower so I can eat well and don't overindulge, feeling good so I might do some proper fitness. I say proper, I might do some more strenuous, intense fitness training if it's that's what I'm trying to do today, or come back to the desk and do some more work. So yeah, fresh air, a walk in the fresh air, or finish off the day with a walk in the fresh air, and sort of put the working day behind me. For all those reasons, a walk in the fresh air is my tiny empowering action, and yeah, it's very empowering and very powerful.
Yeah, and for me, you're almost describing that as a super habit, which is something we help people to uncover as they go on the journey through the book. But actually, something that before the pandemic, people maybe wouldn't even think about having to plan to go for a walk. But now it's just essential for many people, because if they don't deliberately plan to do it, they're not leaving the house. And some people reporting to me they don't leave the house for a week, which doesn't make them feel very good about themselves. So these basic um, fundamental things that we need to do to get our brain working well, humans are designed to walk about 12 miles a day, we think. They are harder than ever to do. So that means that we've got to plan ahead to give ourselves more control over them. And the act of writing that down or typing it out is so key to helping us to get it done. And that's another I suppose, invisible factor of creating a T plan is that you're writing down something or you're typing it out, you're committing to it. And by doing that, you are just making it easier for yourself to remember the thing that you wanted to do. And therefore you're more likely to do it. So you're switching on your neocortex is how we'd explain it. So we rate ourselves out of 10. And again, actually, for the you're watching the video, I'll just show you you can see the scale there. 1 to 10, which is we detail that in the book. We just gives a bit more depth as to what might each number mean for you, just to make it easier to do. You've created your tiny empowering action. Just one thing to start with. Don't try to do too much. Don't try to do too much. Just do one thing. Step 3 is explain why. Why
Yeah.
is doing that thing going to be helpful for you?
Yeah, I was going to say, John, when you do read the book, it's just 3 steps to do it, to create a T plan. You've done the self-watching, as you call it, rate yourself. You've stated your tiny empowering action. Yeah, the explanation then is the final element of it. Why is that a part of? I was going to ask, why is that that explanation, that stating of why your tiny empowering action will benefit you? Why is that necessary?
Yeah, great question. If we go back to the 9 action factors, personal motivation is one of those factors. The core tool we use to help people to activate their personal motivation, which is chapter 16 in the book, is the FAM story iceberg. And we're going to that you're going to be able to do that in the app as well. Create your FAM story iceberg. So the FAM story iceberg allows people to really harness the power of goals and connecting their long-term goals with their medium-term goals to their short-term goals. And we already talked about goal setting can be done really poorly or it can be done really well. And we know that one of the criteria to do goal setting really well is to make our goals really meaningful. And a really quick way to make goals meaningful is to ask why times 5. So I might say, for example, in the distant future, I want to have enough money to buy a house in that part of town. And you might say, well, why is that important? Well, that's the best school district in town. Well, why is that important? Well, I want to give my kids the chance to go to the best school they can. Well, why is that important? Well, I want to be the best parent that I can be. Well, why is that important? Well, I don't want to look back in 10 years and regret that I didn't give my kids the best chance to go to the best school. So all of a sudden, being efficient and effective today so that I can have a better chance of getting the pay rise this year, so I can have a better chance of saving up enough money to buy a house in that part of time becomes much more meaningful. Now, of course, we're trying to make the T plan process as easy as possible for people to do. And you can do the T plan easily in 2 minutes once you get up and running with it. In fact, you can do it in under 2 minutes. But the reason that step 3 is why is to make your tiny empowering action, more meaningful, and therefore you'll be more likely to do it. And the more you understand about your FAM story, your bigger goals, the easier it will be for you to complete the why. Also, the why is allowing you to activate some of the reward and penalty systems, another one of the 9 action factors. And I go into the 9 action factors in loads of detail in chapter 18 in the book. And in fact, we have a webinar coming up on the 22nd of February where I'm going to talk about the 9 action factor model. We'll put a sign up link to that free webinar on the February the 22nd in the show notes if you haven't seen it already. But yeah, the reward and penalty system factor is also partially being activated by answering the why question. I think it silently activates some of the other factors as well. But that's some of the neuroscience behind why why is the third part of the plan.
Yeah, and I think I notice in the book, interestingly, obviously now you've taken us through the 3 steps, and that hopefully something people can implement. But with any new thing, I guess people might be slightly confused or intimidated perhaps when they're trying to implement something in their life that's new. But you make the point in the book that you improve your use of this the more you use it. That's another invisible benefit, if you like. You get better at tea planning the more you do it.
Yeah, because we get good at what we practice, but also every day the tea plan challenges us to think about ourselves in an intelligent way. It challenges to do intelligent self-watching. We're not wired for this. We're wired for, so we're most people are probably just listening to what we're saying now, but we can see each other, Andrew, because we're recording this for YouTube as well. And we can see each other almost in 20/20 vision. When it comes to understanding ourselves and looking at ourselves, it's nowhere near 20/20 vision. You know, we're partially blind to how we think and how we feel. You know, so you might have a rumbling in your stomach. Is that, are you hungry? Have you got something wrong down there? Are you just a bit tired? We can't read ourselves that well, but we're only going to get better at understanding ourselves and seeing ourselves by thinking about ourselves and developing our ability to understand our emotions and regulate our emotions. You know, emotional regulation is the core psychological construct that runs throughout the habit mechanic book and the Tougher Minds approach. So we're going to get better at understanding ourselves if we revisit this daily, but also we're going to get better at establishing the behaviors that we practice. So I'm just trying, yeah. So we see some people in the app, for example, their daily tea plan is actually to do what we call a DES swap, which is a diet, exercise, sleep swap plan. And we can see that every day whatever they're practicing, they are improving essentially. So we get good at what we practice. And one of the things actually at the weekend, just I think we're a few weeks into the Six Nations now. We've got, for the first time ever, we've got the top 2 ranked rugby union teams in the world in that competition.
That's France and Ireland, isn't it? I think
France and Ireland. And it's
yeah.
really interesting that the part of the rationale that's given to the strength of those teams is that both teams play in the same style as the dominant club team in each country. So they're borrowing, if you like, the tactics and the standard way of playing that their main club team in each country plays, and that, you know, some of the core players come from. So this idea that they've already habitualized the core way of thinking and doing, whereas someone like the England team that has new management, transition, I'd say, of some of the core playing positions, that their way of doing things just isn't anywhere near as efficient and effective as they'd like it to be. And one of the things I was thinking about at the weekend actually was that, and this brings us to the T plan. You know, you could practice every day setting a goal. You could just set a goal in the way that someone taught you to set a goal. Or you could every day do the T plan. If you do the T plan, it's going to be a much faster and more reliable way to be your best. You're going to get to the behaviors that you want to habitualize much faster, because by using a T plan, you're using a behaviorally science-backed approach. And what I would argue is that the teams that want to establish more efficient and effective ways of doing what they want to do on the field are going to do it much faster if they implement insights from behavioral science. I just don't think that elite level coaching has had the opportunity to access something like the nine. Well, I think the 9 action factor model is unique, but it's not in their parlance yet. It's not in their language. So I think by default, trying to get the teams to where they want to get them to do is going to be much more of an upward battle than if they could actually use insights from behavioral science.
Yeah, and I think it's worth pointing out, John, certainly from my point of view, that the Habit Mechanic University app, which as we can see on screen, is available to download from the Apple App Store and for Android devices too. That helps you do this T plan and implement it into your life instantly on a daily basis. And you rightly call the app the faster, more reliable way to be your best every day. And this T plan exemplifies that. And then, of course, we're talking about chapter 1 of the Habit Mechanic. I'd encourage everyone to get their hands on a copy of the book. It's already been tremendously popular on Amazon, as we can see, and people can get that on a Kindle or a physical copy of the book, and either way,
An audio.
Yeah, yes, indeed, Audible. Yeah, so chapter 1 that we're talking about now is just the start, but so much in there, so powerful, and I couldn't encourage people enough to try and get their hands on it. And yeah, as you say, we've done podcasts before together, which have been really enjoyable, but now we are on trying to cover all bases, as it were, and appear on YouTube. So I guess the message to everyone is like, subscribe, share, and follow on, because the intention, I understand that, John, is to do more and look in to each chapter of the book in this depth and really bring it to life for people.
Yeah, that's what we want to do. We want to make it as easy as possible for people to get the benefits from this toolkit, from this manual. And it's interesting, actually, that so we could write down the T plan in a notebook. We could do it on the PDF document that we share via the book. But when you do it in the app, you activate another factor in an action factors, the social influence piece. You're bringing the community knowledge and skills piece. So the app brings additional behavioral science benefits. That's why we have the app. It's not for a laugh. It's to make it easier for people to be at their best. And we're only going to start to release more and more powerful features in there. But you can, we're going to make it easier to do the T plan in the app, but everyone can do the T plan in the app now and get those additional benefits of holding themselves accountable and getting the support of the Habit Mechanic community. So there are, you talked about people not being always sure about how to do something when they first see a new tool. And obviously we try to address that best we can in chapter 1 with the frequently asked questions section.
Yes. Yeah.
Lots of those questions relate much more broadly to actually, building and establishing new habits and behaviors. But what else was interesting to you there, Andrew?
Well, I think I was going to come on to that, John, actually. Yeah, I know people do often have a lot of questions for you when you have worked with them one-to-one and in group scenarios, and through the book and online as well. And I thought it would be helpful just to try and raise some of the questions that people have specifically put about daily T plans, and get your unique feedback on them. I think something people have asked quite a lot is, should they focus on the same tiny empowering action every day? For example, should it be a physical action? Should it be go for a walk? Should they do the same tiny empowering action every day?
Yeah, it's a great question. The key is to get some positive change momentum, to feel like you're making some progress. And it's going to be easier to do if you keep focusing on the same thing in the first instance. But the first time you create a T plan, the thing you select might not be helpful for you. So you might pick something the day after. The thing you pick the day after, you might find that's not going to be helping me actually when I've tried it. But once you've settled on something, you think this is really helping me. Yeah, do persist with it. And once you feel that, right, I've got that going now, then pick something else. But in a way, what you need to do is be aware of what is helping you and use your own judgment. There's no right or wrongs here. This is a journey of self-discovery. For me, becoming a habit mechanic is like doing a PhD on yourself. it's about trying and testing. But um, I mean, the thing that I pick every day is to create a willpower story, because I know if I create a willpower story, I'm going to be able to activate lots of, helpful habits and behaviors. But I've built up to that over years and years and years of testing this stuff out. I do absolutely know, excuse me, that if I don't create a T plan to create a willpower story, I forget to do it. I forget, and my day is far less efficient and effective. So it is a real powerful tool. And it might be so. I don't always do a T plan at the weekend, but sometimes I do. I might do a T plan at the weekend to say, don't check my emails today, for example. Again, I know if I do that, I'm not going to do it. I might even sometimes have to set a T plan and say, don't go into the office, on a Saturday. Sometimes I find myself doing that. Well, and I now know that I need to have, a full day off to really recharge my batteries. So I'm giving an example there that's, I've got one thing in the working week that I might use, but then another thing at the weekend. So it's depending, what the goals are.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I think connected to that, and something else people ask, and obviously the tiny empowering action is about behavior change and starting to develop new helpful habits. Um, uh, it's a related question. People will often ask, how long does it take to build a new habit? And you kind of see these figures bandied around online. Well, X days, Y days. So how do you answer that specific question in relation and in with referring to this exercise, the T plan in developing new helpful habits? How long does it take?
Yeah, and I think it's worth pointing out what we mean by behavior. Behavior is everything that we're thinking and doing. That's how we think about it. So a thought is a behavior. So when you think I'm useless, I'm rubbish, that's a behavior. And the behaviors are the seeds of habits. The more we repeat a behavior, the more habitual it will become. The habits are very complicated. So there isn't an answer to the question, how long does it take to build a better habit? It's definitely not 21 days. Um, Sometimes I think you can do it faster. You can reestablish a habit faster than that. The way to think about habits they are neurobiological connections in your brain. So our brain is about 100 billion neurons, and all those neurons have a purpose, they have a function, they have a job. If I'm trying to re-establish a habit like creating a willpower story every day, because I've just been on holiday for the last 2 weeks and I haven't done it for 2 weeks, because I've practiced doing willpower stories for years and years, I've got loads of neurons in my brain to create a daily habit of doing a willpower story. So I can re-establish that habit really quickly. A habit that I've just been establishing since the start of January is my core exercises. So I actually remember that maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I'd got really out of the habit of doing any core work, and literally I started on the 1st of January by doing one press up and one sit up. The day after I did 2 press ups and 2 sit ups. The day after I did 3 and 3, and built up literally like that. In more recent times, I've had really good habits of just doing a little bit of core in the morning before I go for my run. And I normally do 50 press ups, 50 sit ups, 25 pull ups. But because before Christmas was really hectic, and we had a really busy year launching the Habit Mechanic book, I was just exhausted, and literally, although I kept on running, my core just went out of the window, my core work. So at the beginning of this year, I decided to take a slightly different approach. And what I've been doing is I've been setting the goal to do 1,000 core repetitions every week. So a repetition would be one press up, one sit up, one pull up. And since I set that goal at the beginning of the year, I've done it easily. I've done 1,000 core exercises easily, every single week. However, if I was starting that from scratch, several years ago, I'd have no chance of establishing that habit so quickly. So some habits are going to be really easy for you to re-establish. Equally, something that might feel like a new habit, there might be lots of other things you've done previously that underpin doing that habit well. So just to take a simple example, it might be, well, I've done loads of I've done I've been in the habit of doing press ups before. Now I want to start to do sit ups. Well, although you've maybe never done sit ups before, because you've got all the press up wires in your brain, they're quite transferable. Maybe the same. I want to start doing a run, a really light run, but I've never done it before. Well, if you do your light run around the same route that you go for your little short walk, then you're already building on something that's quite familiar, just as an example. But on the other end of the continuum, there might be behaviors that you want to establish, habits that you want to start to build that are very unfamiliar to you. So you might have spent the last 20 years beating yourself up and telling yourself how useless you are. And you want to build some different wires in your brain that allow you to counter that and to talk to yourself in a different way. Now, that's going to take some time if it isn't something you've practiced. I see people saying, well, I tried to do a dead swap yesterday to improve my sleep and it didn't work. What we have to recognize is that we're good at what we've we're good at what we practice. And whatever we're good at today, for better or for worse, that's because we've practiced it a lot. And whatever we want to get better at in the future, we're going to have to practice that a lot as well. And
As I suppose in a way you were using the example of a physical exercise routine or a personal exercise routine just as an example, as a framework to help people understand the process of building helpful habits. And I guess the message, in the same way as physical exercise, thinking habits, thinking behaviors, it's use it or lose it.
yeah, use it or lose it, or you get good at what you practice. So if we want to maintain behaviors, we've got to keep engaging in them. If we want to establish new ways of thinking and doing, we've got to start to practice them. And we're going to be much more likely to start to practice it if we've got our T plan, if we've got our fam story. And it's easy to see the muscles on your arm. And we know that if we practice working out the muscle, the fibers get bigger and stronger. It's, in very rudimentary terms, it's the same in your brain. It's just that you can't see your brain. It's encased inside a skull. That's why I really go into a lot of detail in the book about learning in a really accessible, friendly way. But learning is at the heart of improving. Learning is at the heart of being healthier, being happier, being at your best, being a great leader, developing a great culture. And we can all learn. We can all get better at whatever we want to get better at, but we have to put practice in. So that's why, instead of worrying about in 21 days, will I have this habit or won't I have this habit? For me, it's much more helpful just to keep checking in with yourself every day and noticing where you are in that continuum. And it's much more interesting for me not to be perfect at a habit in 21 days, but to be seeing I'm doing better. I'm scoring consistently higher scores. And when you start to plug that into your fam story, you start to use some of the habit metrics in the book, you start to get a much more powerful self-improvement ecosystem than you do than just thinking about, well, if 21 days, I'll either be good or I won't be any good.
Yeah, it's such a different view of it that so when compared to some of these glib and quite simplistic answers you see, as I say, online, with random numbers stated about how long it will take someone to develop helpful habits and change their behavior to help them. Just another couple of quick questions, actually, John, which again, I know people have asked about the T plan, and you've answered and helped them understand it and implement it. Can they do more than one a day? People might think, does it have to be one? Does it have to just be one action? Can you do multiple T plans in any one day?
You can, and I see people doing this in the app. It's not something I do, but I see people doing it in the app. So people create more than one tiny empowering action, but they generate a separate why rationale for that. Again, you do what's most helpful for you is the key thing. But I'd recommend starting with one and building that rhythm. Um, so I don't see people rating themselves twice out of 10 each day, but there's some people definitely do create more than one tiny empowering aim. Yeah, I see that.
Okay, that's interesting. And another question I know people have is that well, it's I guess it's not so much a question as a bit of feedback. I know sometimes people have cited to you that they'll cite the inability of themselves, if you like, to really nail down something. They might overthink the whole process of setting a goal, what they want to achieve, and overcomplicate it, if you like, overthink it. How should they try to overcome that bump in the road if that's what they're faced with when they're trying to implement this piece of insight into their daily lives?
Pick one thing and have a go at doing that. You've got to pick one thing. Tomorrow you might recognize that wasn't the right thing to pick, but only by implementing it, will you understand if it's going to work for you or not. So I think if you're not sure what to do, just go with one of the examples in the book. Have a go at that. Pick the end of day reflection is a really powerful one. If you look at chapter 22, the stress management chapter, there are loads of end of day reflection tools in there, including the 3-to-1, which is something else people post in the app. In fact, I first introduced the 3-to-1 reflection in the book in chapter 5, and I'm posting that in the app every workday, as many other people are as well. So yeah, it's just to pick one thing. You can look on the app, get some inspiration, see what other people are doing. But this is about doing things differently. It's not about knowing more stuff. You can know, if we want to use the physical analogy again, you can know how to get physically fit. You can know how to be good at lifting weights until you get in the gym, until you put your trainers on. You're not going to make any impact, on your body. And the same with this stuff. You can know how to do a perfect T plan. Um, you can know how to become a habit mechanic, but until you use the tools, put them into practice, then that's the only way you're going to impact your brain function and impact the habits that you've got to get rid of more of your destructive habits and build more super habits.
And I think that's why I said at the start that the T plan is a bit of a microcosm of Tougher Minds and the Habit Mechanic book and Habit Mechanic University app, because it is doing something, it's taking action, it's a tiny empowering action every day to start yourself on the road of building helpful habits. It's good habit practice, if you like, to use a sporting analogy. And that's why it is makes such an impact right at the start of the book in the first chapter, because you get people doing things immediately. It does make such an impact. It certainly did on me, for sure. And I know as well that this on the face of it very straightforward tool connects to more even more powerful tools later on in the book as well. It helps people, it gives people a pathway towards them.
Yeah, this is all the tools in the book are broken into either daily tools, weekly tools, or monthly/bi-monthly tools. So in chapter 36, I give a breakdown of which is which. There's a lot of similarity across all the tools, in the sense they're all about doing more intelligent self-watching and more intelligent planning. So the T plan, although it's super powerful in its own right and fantastically beneficial, the additional benefit is it's training you to make it easier for you to access the other tools, because they all require you to do intelligent self-watching and intelligent planning. So yeah, all these things are interconnected, and when we start to plug them together, the results are much more beneficial, And I've heard feedback about people saying I've used habit tracker apps before, and the reason I like the Habit Mechanic University better is because it gives me this very specific focus on this one powerful thing, and it gives me a process to achieving that thing. Whereas the habit tracker apps made me feel bad about myself because I just had a list of things every day that I hadn't actually achieved. In a connected way, I'm also hearing, these are very experienced people saying, I've set quite sophisticated goals for most of my life. Connecting my, in simple terms, my long term, my short term, my medium term, my long, medium, short term goals. But then saying how plugging in the habits into that and the T plan has just supercharged what they can get out of those goals, and how powerful that goal setting process is for them. So yeah, the T plan, for example, plugs directly into the bottom of the FAM story iceberg, which we talk about in chapter 16. So everything's interconnected and they all supercharge each other.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to more podcasts and the opportunity to take a deep dive into each chapter of the Habit Mechanic book, and gain this sort of insight and discuss the ideas and the principles and the tools within them with you. It's a unique opportunity. And of course, people can download the Habit Mechanic University app from the Apple App Store, and for Android devices as well. It's free to download. Yeah, please do. I suppose the message has got to be like, subscribe, and share this podcast now, as we do try to appear on more and more platforms and make it accessible to more and more people.
Yeah, absolutely. If you like what we're saying, like what we're doing, subscribe, like, tell other people about it. There's one thing that we want to offer people as a bit of a reward for participation. Before we share that, I just want to talk very quickly about one of the most exciting things that I'm doing at the moment. Is that, I'm not sure if you know, Andrew, but we've actually started to train a small select group of people to become certified habit mechanic coaches. And we started to do that just before Christmas. So this is teaching people, I suppose, how to transform their clients, their teams, their people's lives without having to do a PhD in performance psychology. We've done all that work for you. We're showing people how to implement the tools from the book to the people that they want to help. So into their coaching practice, into the way that they lead, into the way that they help their team to fill their potential. So I'm working with people to become certified habit mechanic coaches over about 10 hours. It's a 10-hour one-to-one coaching program where we teach people how to use the habit mechanic metric tools that are in the habit mechanic book, so you can use them to help your people to start identifying their destructive habits and understanding their super habits. I'm showing people how to use the 30 plus award-winning habit mechanic tools that are in the book, but I'm showing people how to actually use them with their clients. So we give habit mechanic coaches copies of the book, access to the premium subscription levels of the app, so they can actually start to coach their people and their clients in the way that myself and Tougher Minds colleagues do that work. When you become a certified habit mechanic coach, you go on our website, we promote you to our database, you become, part of a elite group of coaches that are recognized as using cutting edge insights from neuroscience and behavioral science to help others to be at their best. And if you've got your own coaching practice, us promoting you to our website is going to get you more clients ultimately. So that's really, really exciting, and we're working with such a diverse range of people, from some of the biggest organizations in the world, all the way through to people who've got their own coaching companies. We are at about capacity on that program. But if you are interested in learning more, just give us a shout, because we probably will open some more places later on in the year. So that's the Certified Habit Mechanic Coaching Program that's really exciting work that I'm doing at the moment, and start to onboard some new people into the program this week. So we want to give something back to people that contribute. So we're interested in your questions. We've gone through some of the frequently asked questions that we talked about in the book. But as we're giving this deeper dive into the habit mechanic approach, as you're using the tools, questions I'm sure will emerge that we're happy to answer. So if you've got a question that you'd like us to answer, just submit it to us via email at contact@tougherminds.co.uk, contact@tougherminds.co.uk, or you can submit it via the Tougher Minds website, which is tougherminds.co.uk. We're going to pick the best question we think that's going to be most helpful and most interesting to everybody else. And the person that we select is going to win a year's free subscription to the premium levels of the Habit Mechanic University app. If you're already subscribed, we just add that year onto the subscription. So you just get a bonus year if you like. So that's what we're going to start to do. So hopefully by next episode we'll have some questions submitted, and we will do our best to answer those. And even though we'll only read out one winner per week, we might do some separate podcasts where we just answer those questions very specifically. So if you answer a question, if you ask a question, we'll definitely do our best to answer it via the podcast. How does that sound, Andrew? Did I miss anything?
That sounds absolutely fantastic. It's a great opportunity, I think, for people, again, to get even more insight. Something you're trying to do, obviously, via this podcast is give people even more insight into the ideas, into the principles, into the tools in the Habit Mechanic book. But the question opportunity, the opportunity to put your questions. I guess people might have a copy of the book already, as you say, John, and have a specific point. So that'll be fascinating too. So yeah, it's a great opportunity, and I hope people will put their questions into you, and I'm sure it'll be extremely beneficial.
Yeah, so looking forward to that. So looking forward then to our next podcast, we are going to talk about chapter 2, the title of which is My Story and Why Becoming a Habit Mechanic is Essential for Happiness, Success in Our Challenging World. So that's going to be the next episode. Looking forward to digging into the details of that. But that's all for us for now. So I'd like to say thank you to you, Andrew, for asking such insightful questions and getting me thinking. Thank you to everyone for listening. And remember, you're only one habit away.